Hey everyone, I hope you enjoy this. If you do, feel free to let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Wishing you a great time watching. My name's Jake. I'm 35, married to Danielle for the last 8 years, and I thought we were solid. I mean, not perfect. What relationship is? But we had a good rhythm going, careers that kept us busy, a house we were slowly fixing up together, and plans for kids in the near future. At least that's what I thought. Looking back now, I can't pinpoint the exact moment things started to go south, but there were signs, subtle at first. Danielle, who used to be all about weekend hikes and our Netflix marathons, started spending more time at work. She was in marketing, so late nights and networking events weren't unusual. Still, the frequency ramped up, and her excuses started to sound rehearsed. One evening, while she was meeting with clients, I noticed her laptop on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with a text notification. "I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" It was from someone named Mark. Just Mark. At first, I felt like an idiot for even reading it. This was my wife. I shouldn't be snooping, right? But curiosity, or maybe that gut feeling, got the better of me. I tapped the trackpad to read more, but the screen was locked. My heart was already racing, though. Mark wasn't someone I'd ever heard of, and that message wasn't something a colleague or client would send. When Danielle got home that night, I tried to play it cool. I didn't ask about her evening. I just watched her carefully, looking for something, a twitch in her expression, a slip in her story. But she was as composed as ever, chatting about how the client dinner dragged on too long and how the food was terrible. I told myself not to overthink it, but I couldn't shake the feeling. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every interaction we'd had over the last few weeks. The late nights, the sudden need for privacy on her phone, the way she'd started dodging my touch, like even a simple kiss was too much. It wasn't until the next morning that I decided to dig deeper. While she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking, but I told myself I just needed to confirm she was talking to this Mark guy. That's all. The messages were right there in her recent chats, and as soon as I opened the thread, my worst fears came true. "Last night was amazing. I can still smell your perfume on my jacket. Don't forget our little secret." Winky face. I felt sick. My stomach dropped, my chest tightened, and my vision blurred as I tried to process the words on the screen. It wasn't just friendly banter or a misunderstanding. This was full-on, behind-my-back cheating. Before I could scroll further, I heard the shower stop. Panic set in. I locked her phone and put it back just as she opened the bathroom door, towel wrapped around her. She smiled at me like everything was normal, like she wasn't destroying me piece by piece. I didn't confront her then. I couldn't. Instead, I pretended I hadn't seen anything, even though my world was already starting to crumble. The next few days were a blur of forced smiles and fake conversations. Every time Danielle walked into the room, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of what I knew. But I kept it all inside, playing the role of the unsuspecting husband while silently watching her every move. Danielle was good at hiding it, I'll give her that. If I hadn't seen the texts, I might have believed the casual way she talked about work or how she laughed at my lame jokes during dinner. But now I noticed the cracks, like how she would check her phone constantly, then angle it away from me when I glanced her way, or how she seemed less present, zoning out during conversations. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure how to get them without tipping her off. So I decided to take the subtle route, or as subtle as I could manage. I started checking her phone whenever I got the chance. Early mornings when she was in the shower, late at night when she fell asleep before me. But she was smart. The texts with Mark were always deleted, leaving no trail. It made me wonder just how long this had been going on. That's when I had an idea. A buddy of mine called as a tech wizard, like the kind of guy who could probably hack into NASA if he wanted to. I didn't tell him everything, just that I needed help recovering deleted texts on a phone. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't push for details. A few hours later, he sent me a link to an app that could do exactly that. That night, as Danielle slept soundly beside me, I installed the app on her phone. My hands were sweating, and I kept glancing over at her, half expecting her to wake up and catch me. But she didn't. Within minutes, the app was pulling up a list of deleted messages. What I found made my blood run cold. Mark wasn't just some casual fling. He was deeply entwined in her life, our life. The messages were explicit, yes, but they were also intimate. He knew things about her that even I didn't. Her favorite wine, the little quirks that made her laugh, even complaints she'd made about me. One texted me like a punch to the gut. Sometimes I feel like I'm living two lives. I just wish I could be with you, without all the sneaking around. Another, don't worry, babe. He doesn't suspect a thing. I wanted to throw her phone across the room, to wake her up and demand an explanation right then and there. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed more than texts. I needed undeniable proof. The next day, I called out of work, claiming I wasn't feeling well. Danielle left for the office, kissing me on the forehead like she hadn't just stabbed me in the back. As soon as she was gone, I started digging through her stuff, her drawers, her laptop, even her car. I felt like a paranoid lunatic, but I didn't care. That's when I found it. In the glove compartment of her car, tucked beneath an old map, was a hotel keycard. The kind you swipe to get into a room. My hands shook as I turned it over, staring at the logo of a boutique hotel downtown. I didn't need to be a detective to figure out what it meant. It wasn't just messages anymore. She was meeting him in person, somewhere outside the life we'd built together. Somewhere they could pretend I didn't exist. That night, as I sat on the couch with Danielle watching TV, the key card burned a hole in my pocket. I felt like I was about to explode, but I stayed calm, biting my tongue every time she laughed at some stupid sitcom joke. My mind was racing. I had enough proof to confront her, but I didn't just want answers. I wanted to know how far this had gone. How much of my life was a lie? So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Instead, I was going to follow her. The day after finding the hotel key card, I felt like I was spiraling. Every moment with Danielle felt like a cruel joke, a performance where she played the devoted wife while hiding an entirely different life. I needed clarity, but more than that, I needed leverage. And as fate would have it, clarity arrived in the form of an unlikely ally. Enter Lauren. Lauren was one of Danielle's co-workers, and if Danielle's late-night rants were anything to go by, her mortal enemy. Danielle hated her, called her overambitious, cutthroat, and fake nice. I hadn't paid much attention to those comments before, but now they had a new significance. I bumped into Lauren by accident, or maybe it wasn't an accident. I'd stopped by Danielle's office to surprise her with lunch, something I hadn't done in years. I wasn't really there for lunch, though. I was there to observe. Danielle wasn't at her desk when I arrived, but Lauren was. "Hey, you're Danielle's husband, right?" she asked, her bright smile not quite reaching her eyes. "That's me," I said, forcing a casual tone. She glanced around, then leaned in a little closer. "Look, I don't mean to overstep, but is everything okay with her? She's been acting strange lately." That got my attention. Strange how? Lauren hesitated, as if debating whether or not to spill the tea. Then, with a small shrug, she said, "It's probably nothing. She's just been super secretive, taking calls she won't discuss, leaving early or staying late without explanation. I figured you'd know if something was going on." I played dumb. "Oh yeah, just work stuff, I think. You know how it is." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, like she didn't quite believe me. "Sure, work stuff." There was something in her tone, something that hinted she knew more than she was letting on. I decided to take a gamble. "Lauren, if you've noticed anything off, I'd really appreciate it if you told me. Danielle hasn't been herself lately, and I'm worried." She studied me for a moment, then sighed. "All right. Off the record, I've noticed her getting really close to someone. Not here at the office, but her boss, Michael, seems to be in the loop. They've had a lot of closed-door meetings lately, more than usual. And sometimes, when she leaves early, it's right after those meetings. That hit like a ton of bricks." Michael? Her boss? Was he part of this, or just another puzzle piece? "Thanks for letting me know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No problem," Lauren replied, her expression softening. "If I see anything else suspicious, I'll let you know." Lauren wasn't exactly a friend, but I could tell she enjoyed the idea of one-upping Danielle. Maybe her motivations weren't entirely altruistic, but I didn't care. I needed someone on the inside, and she was offering her help. Later that week, Lauren delivered her first piece of intel. Danielle had another client dinner, but this time Lauren confirmed she wasn't with clients at all. She was at a lounge downtown, meeting with Michael. I drove to the location, parking a block away, and sitting in my car like some amateur detective. Sure enough, I spotted Danielle and Michael through the large windows of the lounge. They weren't holding hands or anything, but their body language was intimate. She leaned in close to him, laughing at something he said. He rested a hand on her arm. I felt a mix of emotions: rage, confusion, heartbreak. Was she cheating with him, too? Was he just a decoy to keep her other affair under wraps? My mind raced with possibilities, but I knew I couldn't jump to conclusions. I decided to document everything. I snapped photos from a distance, making sure to capture their closeness without drawing attention to myself. A few days later, Lauren texted me with another update. Something weird's going on. Danielle's been meeting with Michael more than ever. Also, Mark is real. She accidentally called him during a meeting and freaked out when she realized it. Mark. So he wasn't just a figment of my paranoia. I wanted to press Lauren for more details, but I knew I had to tread carefully. Danielle couldn't know I was onto her yet. That night, I asked Danielle about her boss, testing the waters. How's Michael these days? I asked casually as we ate dinner. Her fork froze mid-air for a split second before she resumed eating. Same as always. Why? No reason, I said, shrugging. Just wondering how work's going. She launched into a spiel about how busy she was, how demanding Michael could be. But the more she talked, the more rehearsed it sounded. I nodded along, pretending to buy it, but inside my suspicions grew. The pressure was mounting, and I could feel it on both sides. Danielle was getting more guarded, and I was running out of patience. Lauren's updates were becoming more frequent, each one adding another layer of complexity to the situation. And then came the kicker. Lauren texted me late one night. Danielle and Michael have a hotel room booked tomorrow. I overheard her confirm the reservation. A hotel room, just like the key card I'd found. I wasn't sure what was worse, the idea of her cheating with Mark, or the possibility that Michael was involved too. Either way, I needed to catch her in the act. The next morning, I woke up with a singular focus: catch Danielle red-handed. The idea of her and Michael meeting in a hotel room made my stomach churn, but I knew I had to stay calm and collected. Danielle was already up, bustling around the kitchen like it was any other day. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out, saying she had back-to-back meetings and wouldn't be home until late. Her casual demeanor made me want to scream, but I just smiled and wished her a good day. When she was gone, I called Lauren. Hey, it's Jake, I said. Can you tell me more about that hotel reservation? She didn't waste time. I overheard her on the phone, confirming it yesterday. It's at the Palisade Hotel, downtown. Room 412. She said she'd be there around 5:30. I clenched my jaw. That gave me just enough time to plan. Thanks, Lauren. I owe you. Just catch her, she said with a mix of seriousness and satisfaction. She deserves whatever's coming. At 4:45, I parked across the street from the Palisade Hotel. My heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I had to know. I waited in the car, watching the entrance. Sure enough, at 5:20, Danielle arrived. She was dressed to the nines, heels, a fitted dress, her hair styled like she was headed to a gala. Not exactly back-to-back meetings attire. She walked inside, and I followed a few minutes later, keeping my distance. The lobby was quiet, with a single receptionist manning the desk. I pretended to check my phone while scanning the room. Then I saw him. Michael. He was sitting in one of the plush lobby chairs, scrolling on his phone. When Danielle approached, he stood and greeted her with a hug. One of those lingering hugs that said more than words ever could. They didn't see me as they headed toward the elevators. I ducked behind a column, my pulse hammering in my ears. When the elevator doors closed, I approached the desk. Excuse me, I said to the receptionist, trying to sound casual. I'm supposed to meet some friends in room 412, but I think I left my phone in their car. Could you call up and let them know I'm here? The receptionist hesitated, eyeing me suspiciously. Do you have a name for the reservation? I panicked for a split second before remembering Lauren's tip. Danielle. Danielle Carter. She checked her screen, then nodded. I'll ring the room for you. As she reached for the phone, I waved her off. Actually, never mind. I'll just head up. She frowned. I can't let you go up without. Before she could finish, someone walked in behind me, distracting her. I took my chance and slipped toward the elevators, hitting the button for the fourth floor. The elevator ride felt endless. When I finally reached the fourth floor, I stepped out and scanned the hallway. Room 412 was at the far end. My legs felt like lead as I walked toward it, my heart pounding harder with each step. I stood outside the door for a moment, listening. I could hear muffled voices inside, but nothing distinct. Part of me wanted to kick the door down, but I knew I needed proof, solid, undeniable proof. Then an idea hit me. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door. There was a pause, then Michael's voice. "Who is it?" I didn't answer. Instead, I knocked again. "Probably room service," Danielle said, her voice muffled but unmistakable. The door opened slightly, and Michael peeked out. His eyes widened when he saw me, but before he could react, I shoved the door open and stepped inside. The room was everything you'd expect. Dim lighting, an untouched bed, a half-empty bottle of wine on the table. Danielle stood frozen near the window, her face pale as a ghost. "Jake," she stammered, "what are you doing here?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pointed my phone at her, recording every detail. "Meeting a client, huh?" I said, my voice colder than I thought possible. "Is this what back-to-back meetings look like?" Michael tried to step between us, his hands raised. "Look, man, this isn't what it looks like. Don't. Just don't." I cut him off, my voice shaking with rage. "You're her boss, for crying out loud. Do you have any idea what you're doing?" Danielle's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. "Jake, please. Let me explain." "Explain what? That you're cheating on me? That you're throwing away our marriage for what? Some hotel meetups?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I'll see you at home," I said, my voice steady now. "If you're even welcome there anymore." I turned and left, leaving both of them standing in stunned silence that I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My head was spinning, replaying the scene in the hotel room over and over. The look on Danielle's face, half shock, half guilt, was burned into my memory. I didn't know what I'd expected. An apology? An admission of guilt? Instead, I got silence. Her inability to even defend herself said everything. When I got home, the house felt colder, emptier, even though nothing had physically changed. I sat on the couch, staring at the spot where Danielle usually curled up with her blanket, scrolling through her phone. I felt stupid, humiliated. How had I let it get this far without seeing the signs? Hours passed before I heard the familiar sound of Danielle's car pulling into the driveway. My chest tightened as the front door creaked open. "Jake," she called hesitantly. I didn't answer. A moment later, she appeared in the doorway to the living room. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, like she'd spent the entire drive crying. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I motioned for her to sit, but I didn't look at her. I couldn't. "What were you doing with him?" I asked, my voice flat. She hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of her dress. "It's not what you think. Michael and I—" "Stop," I interrupted, finally meeting her gaze. "Don't lie to me, Danielle. I deserve the truth." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. "It started out innocent," she began, her voice trembling. "Just drinks after work, talking about stressful projects. But then she stopped herself, shaking her head. "But then it what?" I demanded, my tone harsher than I intended. She covered her face with her hands. "I don't know how it got this far. I wasn't thinking. I was just lonely, Jake. You've been so distant lately. Always working late, always distracted. And Michael, he noticed me. He made me feel important." I laughed bitterly. "So that's your excuse? You were lonely? Do you have any idea how hard I've been working to give us the life we have? The house, the trips, the future we planned." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "I know, Jake. I know I messed up, but it wasn't." "Don't say it wasn't serious," I snapped. "You booked a hotel room. You went behind my back. That's about as serious as it gets." Her silence was deafening. The argument went in circles for hours. She begged for forgiveness, swearing it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. But I couldn't shake the image of her in that hotel room. The way she looked at Michael when she thought I wasn't watching. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. "I need space," I said, standing abruptly. "Jake, please," she started, but I cut her off. "I'm staying at Kyle's for a few days," I said, grabbing my keys. "I need time to think." She followed me to the door, but I didn't look back. The last thing I heard before it slammed shut was her sobbing. At Kyle's place, I finally felt like I could breathe. He didn't ask for details, just handed me a beer and let me crash on his couch. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Lauren. "Heard about the hotel. Call me. There's more you need to know." I didn't want to deal with anything, but curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out onto Kyle's porch and called her. "Hey, Lauren," I said. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Jake, I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I overheard something at work yesterday. Danielle isn't just messing around with Michael." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "There's someone else. Mark. He's not from the office, but Danielle's been talking to him a lot lately. I heard her on the phone with him a few days ago, saying she couldn't wait to see him again." Mark, the name from the text. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit, and the picture they formed was worse than I imagined. "Do you know anything about it?" I asked. "Not much," Lauren admitted, "but I'll keep an ear out. If I find anything, I'll let you know." That night, as I lay awake on Kyle's couch, the anger and betrayal boiled over into something else: determination. Danielle thought she could keep spinning lies, but her web was unraveling. I was going to find out everything. No more half-truths, no more excuses. And I wasn't going to do it alone. Lauren's revelation about Mark changed everything. If Danielle wasn't just involved with Michael, but also with someone else entirely, then this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was calculated, ongoing betrayal. The next morning, I called Lauren again, this time armed with questions. "Do you know how to get more details on Mark?" I asked her. She hesitated. "I'm not a private investigator, but Danielle's pretty careless. If she's been seeing him, there might be something on her work laptop. She's terrible about clearing her browser history." Lauren was quickly becoming an unexpected ally, and I was grateful for her willingness to help, even if her motivations weren't entirely selfless. "Thanks, Lauren. Let me know if you find anything," I said. When I got back home later that day, Danielle was at work, and the house was eerily quiet. I hadn't told her I'd be coming back. I just needed to grab some clothes and a few essentials. But as I stood in our bedroom, the urge to snoop took over. I started with her work bag, rifling through folders and notebooks. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then I moved to her desk, scanning for anything that might give me a lead on Mark. And there it was. A crumpled receipt from a coffee shop I didn't recognize, dated 2 days ago. The name written on the receipt wasn't hers. It was Mark W. I felt a rush of adrenaline. I didn't have much to go on, but it was a start. That evening, I met up with Lauren at a local cafe. She slid into the booth across from me, glancing around nervously. "All right," she said, lowering her voice. I dug around a bit. Danielle has a calendar on her work laptop, and there's a recurring entry every Thursday afternoon labeled "Meeting with him." "Could be Mark." "That's something," I said, nodding. "There's more," she added, her eyes narrowing. "Michael's involved too. I overheard him on a call with Danielle this morning, asking if she took care of the situation with Mark." "Took care of the situation?" I repeated, confused. Lauren shrugged. "No idea what it means, but it sounded shady, like they're trying to cover something up." The plot was getting thicker by the minute. Michael and Danielle weren't just having an affair. They were hiding something bigger, and Mark was somehow caught in the middle of it. "Lauren, I need your help," I said, leaning forward. "Can you give me access to that laptop?" She hesitated. "Jake, that's risky. If Danielle finds out." "She won't," I said quickly. "I just need to see her calendar and any emails with Mark or Michael." "That's it." After a long pause, Lauren nodded. "Okay, I'll see what I can do." The next day, I parked outside Danielle's office, waiting for Lauren's signal. She'd agreed to distract Danielle while I slipped in to check her laptop. It felt ridiculous, like I was in some low-budget spy movie, but I was desperate. At exactly 3:15, Lauren texted, "Now." She's in a meeting. I made my way into the building, blending in with the steady flow of office workers. When I reached Danielle's desk, Her laptop was right where Lauren said it would be. I opened it, my hands trembling as I logged in with the password Lauren had provided. It didn't take long to find a calendar entry for meeting with him. The location was listed as a private club downtown, a place I'd never even heard of. I jotted down the address, then moved to her emails. What I found made my blood boil. There were dozens of messages between Danielle and Mark, some dating back months. They weren't just flirty. They were detailed plans for meetings, secret dinners, and even an upcoming weekend trip. One email from Mark stood out. I can't keep doing this. Michael is getting suspicious, and I don't want to be dragged into whatever you two are planning. Let's talk tonight. Same place as usual. Michael suspicious? Dragged into what? I snapped photos of the emails with my phone and closed the laptop, my mind racing. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. Danielle and Michael were involved in something much bigger, and Mark was starting to crack under the pressure. When I got back to my car, I called Lauren. "Thanks for your help," I said, still shaken. "I found some emails. There's something going on between Danielle, Michael, and Mark. Something shady." "What do you mean?" she asked, sounding intrigued. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm going to find out. Mark mentioned meeting tonight. I'm going to be there." At 8 p.m., I parked outside the private club listed in Danielle's calendar. I waited in my car, watching the entrance like a hawk. At 8:30, Mark arrived. He was about my age, with dark hair and a nervous energy about him. He glanced around before heading inside. I followed a few minutes later, keeping my distance. The club was dimly lit, with a bar at one end and private booths along the walls. I spotted Mark in one of the booths, fidgeting with his phone. A moment later, Danielle walked in. I froze, my heart pounding. She didn't see me as she slid into the booth across from Mark. They exchanged a few words, their expressions tense. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it was clear they weren't just catching up. I pulled out my phone, recording the interaction from a safe distance. Whatever they were talking about, it was intense. Danielle gestured emphatically, and Mark shook his head several times. After about 20 minutes, Mark stood abruptly and left the club, looking frustrated. Danielle stayed behind, staring into her drink. I wanted to confront her then and there, but I held back. This wasn't the time. Not yet. Back in my car, I reviewed the video I'd taken, trying to make sense of it all. Mark wasn't just some fling. He was deeply entangled in whatever mess Danielle and Michael had created. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, but I still didn't have the full picture. Not yet. The day after the private club meeting, I couldn't shake the image of Danielle and Mark in that booth. Whatever they were discussing wasn't just about an affair. This went deeper. Lauren called me in the morning, her tone urgent. "Jake, something's off." Danielle was in Michael's office for over an hour this morning. When she left, she looked rattled. I tried to ask her if everything was okay, but she brushed me off. "What do you think they're planning?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. Lauren sighed. "I don't know, but you need to be careful. Whatever this is, it's messy." I overheard Michael saying something about covering their tracks. That evening, I went through the emails I'd taken photos of again. One stuck out to me more now. "Mark, if you say anything, you'll regret it. We've been careful, but you're the weak link. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." It was signed M. Michael? Or Danielle. Either way, the words sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just infidelity. It was manipulation and possibly blackmail. I decided it was time to confront Mark. Part 8. A risky confrontation. I tracked Mark down through the receipt I found in Danielle's car. The coffee shop was his usual spot, and sure enough, there he was sitting alone with a laptop. I approached cautiously, sliding into the seat across from him. His eyes widened when he saw me. "You're Mark, right?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Who's asking?" he replied, already defensive. "Jake, Danielle's husband." His face paled. "Look, I don't want any trouble." Too late for that. I cut him off. "What's going on between you, Danielle, and Michael?" Mark hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I can't talk about it," he muttered. "You don't have a choice," I said, leaning in. "Whatever they're doing, I know you're involved. If you don't tell me, I'll find out another way." Mark's jaw tightened, but after a long pause, he sighed. "Fine. Meet me here tomorrow morning. I'll explain everything." I nodded, leaving before he could change his mind. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop early, grabbing a seat in the corner. Mark showed up a few minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept. He glanced around nervously before sitting across from me. "All right," he said, running a hand through his hair. "You want to know what's going on?" "Fine. But you didn't hear this from me." I nodded, my heart pounding. Danielle and Michael are tied up in some shady business deals. Money laundering, falsifying reports, you name it. I was roped in because I worked with Michael a few years ago. He needed someone to help with certain transactions. "And Danielle?" I pressed. Mark hesitated, guilt flashing in his eyes. "She got involved through Michael. I think she started off just helping him cover his tracks at work. But now, she's in it deep, deeper than I ever was." I leaned back, trying to process the bombshell. "So, what's your role in all this?" "I was a middleman," he admitted, "but I wanted out. That's why Danielle and Michael have been pressuring me. They think I'm going to spill." I stared at him, fury and confusion swirling in my chest. Danielle wasn't just lying to me. She was risking everything, including my future, for this. "What do they plan to do if you talk?" I asked. Mark's face darkened. "Michael's threatened me before. If I step out of line, he'll destroy me." Part 10. More than I bargained for. I left the coffee shop feeling sick. Danielle's affair was bad enough, but now I was tangled in something bigger. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was criminal. When I got home, I started documenting everything. Emails, texts, photos, even my conversations with Lauren and Mark. If Danielle and Michael thought they could cover their tracks, they were about to learn otherwise. My phone buzzed. It was Lauren. "I just found out Danielle booked another hotel room," she said, her voice tense. "But this time Michael isn't involved. She's meeting Mark." "What time?" I asked, my pulse racing. "Tonight at 8. This was my chance to catch them both. I grabbed my phone and prepared for what was coming to be 7:30 that evening. I was parked outside the hotel Lauren had mentioned. The Palisade Hotel again, same as before. My stomach churned as I thought about what I might find inside. Danielle wasn't meeting Michael this time, which raised new questions. What could she possibly need from Mark at this point? I couldn't risk barging in unprepared. This time, I wanted undeniable proof of whatever they were doing. I texted Lauren, "Do you know which room they're in?" Her reply came quickly, "Room 509. Be careful." Careful wasn't exactly my strong suit right now, but I appreciated the warning. At 8:10, I walked through the lobby like I belonged there. No one stopped me as I headed to the elevators, hitting the button for the 5th floor. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone in the building could hear it. When I reached room 509, I paused outside the door, listening. Faint voices drifted through the thin walls, too muffled to make out. I pulled out my phone and started recording, just in case. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door. There was a pause, then the sound of footsteps. A moment later, the door opened slightly, revealing Mark's startled face. "You again," he whispered harshly, glancing back into the room. "Let me in," I said, keeping my voice low. "I'm not here to cause a scene." Mark hesitated, but eventually stepped aside. Inside, Danielle was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face pale as she realized who had just walked in. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, shutting the door behind me. "But I think I already know." Part 12. The cracks widened. Danielle stood, her arms crossed defensively. "This isn't what it looks like," she said quickly. I laughed bitterly. "That line's getting old, Danielle. Why don't you tell me what this really is, then?" Mark looked like he wanted to disappear. "I told you, I didn't want to be a part of this anymore." "Shut up, Mark," Danielle snapped, her composure slipping. I turned to her, my anger bubbling over. "No, let him talk. In fact, I'd love to hear the whole story." Danielle's face hardened, her usual charm replaced by a cold, steely look. "Fine, you want the truth?" Michael and I were handling delicate matters at work. Mark got involved, and now he's trying to back out. That's it, I said, my voice rising. "You're laundering money and dragging me into your mess. And all you can say is that's it?" Danielle's jaw tightened. "I was protecting us. You don't understand how complicated this is." "Protecting us?" I shouted. "By cheating on me? By putting us in danger?" Explain how that works, because I'm dying to know. Mark stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Look, I didn't want any of this. Michael pulled me in, and Danielle, she just followed his lead. I turned back to Danielle, my voice cold. Is that true? You're just following Michael's lead? Or is there more you're not telling me? She didn't answer. The silence was deafening, but it told me everything I needed to know. Whatever loyalty I'd clung to was gone. Danielle wasn't just a cheater. She was a liar, a criminal, and a danger to everything I'd built. I left without another word, slamming the door behind me. I drove aimlessly after leaving the hotel, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Anger, betrayal, and confusion churned inside me like a storm. Danielle's words replayed in my mind. I was protecting us. Protecting us from what? From our own choices? I parked a few blocks from my house and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Lauren. How did it go? She asked cautiously. How do you think? I replied bitterly. She admitted to the money laundering. And Mark's involved too. Lauren hesitated. Jake, there's something else you should know. My stomach sank. What now? Michael's been under investigation for months. Corporate caught wind of some discrepancies in the financial reports. If Danielle's tied to him, it's only a matter of time before they come after her too. The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. You're saying she's being watched? Yes, Lauren confirmed. And if they think you're connected to her, you could get dragged into this mess. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I combed through every piece of evidence I'd gathered. Emails, texts, photos. I needed to protect myself, but more importantly, I needed to get ahead of this before it spiraled further out of control. The next morning, I made an appointment with an attorney. I didn't tell Danielle. The attorney, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Evelyn, listened intently as I laid everything out. You've done a good job documenting this so far, she said, flipping through the photos and emails I printed. But if your wife is involved in criminal activity, you need to protect yourself legally. That means distancing yourself financially and filing for separation immediately. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. Filing for separation made it real, final. What happens to her if the investigation moves forward? I asked. That depends, Evelyn said. If she cooperates, she might avoid jail time. But if she's found complicit and refuses to work with investigators, it won't end well for her. I nodded, the gravity of the situation settling in. What should I do next? Keep gathering evidence, Evelyn advised, and prepare for the worst. If this blows up, you'll need to show you had no involvement in her actions. I left her office with a plan and a sick feeling in my stomach. Danielle wasn't just risking herself, she was risking me. That evening, I decided to confront Danielle one last time. I needed to know the full truth before taking the next step. When I got home, she was in the kitchen, her face tense as she stirred a pot of soup. She didn't look up when I walked in. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady. She sighed, setting down the spoon. What now, Jake? I pulled out the folder of evidence I'd compiled and set it on the table. This, all of this. I know about the money laundering. I know about Mark. And I know you've been working with Michael to cover your tracks. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped. It's complicated, she muttered. Then uncomplicated, I said, my voice rising. Tell me the truth, Danielle. How long has this been going on? And why would you drag me into this mess? She sat down, her hands trembling. Michael started it. He found a way to skim money from the company without anyone noticing. At first, I thought it was harmless, but then things got bigger, and I didn't know how to get out. You didn't know how to get out? I said, incredulous. So you just kept going? And cheating on me was part of that plan? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. Well, it has, I said coldly. And now I'm going to make sure I don't go down with you.